that are
All right, looks like we got some breaking news here. Actually, we got two different cases, two different
both in New York
breaking
as well
news
as
case.
federally
Please listen.
Committing crimes across state borders.
How does Minnesota come into play? At United Healthcare, CEO Brian Thompson shot in the back, assassinated outside the Hilton Convention Hotel in the middle of Manhattan. And you heard our reporter there, Alexis McAdams, saying that funeral services are getting underway. How does that state play a role?
Well, not anything directly. I think that what we have to look at is how the killer was connected potentially to the company. Is this an insider? Is this somebody who had perhaps formerly worked there? Are they connected with people who was feeding him information? So that's the larger scope of what will be looked at.
That we would maybe see something from Minnesota with regard to that. All right, we're gonna toggle back now to the.
We're saying right here that that an individual, a man, matching the description of the gunman of the United Insurance Company, the CEO that was killed. They're saying that they possibly have him. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing right now. But now we're fixing to go over into another breaking case that's just as significant. Please listen to this one.
Simultaneous breaking news at this hour. Those protesters that I was telling you about are speaking now. BLM had threatened to burn down parts of the city, cars, whatnot. Let's watch. They're angry over Daniel Pitty being found not guilty.
Do it for us. And clearly, if we get to this point, it's too late. We have to be there for each other, and that's our call to action. Everybody that's pissed off at this verdict, I challenge you to go outside today and help one person. That's my challenge. If you're angry, if you're hurt, go help one person. That's how we beat the system. That's how we turn this around, by being there for each other.
I just want to say, I miss my son. My son didn't have to go through this. I didn't have to go through this either. It hurts. Really, really hurts. What are we going to do, people? What's going to happen to us now? I had enough of this. The system is rigged. Come on, people. Let's do something about this.
Let's do something about it. Too often, we have Eric Garner's mother here. There's too often this is happening where we're left alone in this society. We got to stop that. We have to change how we impact each other. Jordan came on that subway car. The first thing he asked for was food, and he was killed. And the person who killed him was not held responsible. We cannot allow this to keep happening.
Look like the police are attacking the road there,
Good morning, everyone. Here we stand once again in front of this unjust system. I stood here 10 years ago because they did not give justice to my son with the chokehold. I fought hard to get the anti-chokehold bill passed, which did pass. But it shouldn't only be for police officers, it should be for civilians also. No one deserves to be choked to death. And you know, we're in that courtroom and people are cheering for the verdict. They made the loudest noise, the judge did nothing. But when his father spoke out, they put him out the courtroom. Is that justice? Or what? We can't allow this to keep going on. We have to fight this system. That's what I had to do. I had to fight to get the little justice that I got. I got one police officer fired. There's more that need to be fired. But I tell this family, do not give because that's what they want you to do. They want to discourage you. Just like they tried to discourage me. But 10 years later, I'm still fighting. And I'm not only fighting for myself, I'm fighting for families like yourself. That's why I have to come out when this injustice is done. If this had been the other way, if your family had murdered this so-called innocent guy now, it would have been a different story. He would have been in jail. It would have never came out. But they don't do the same to us. It's two justice systems. And we have to stop this. And the only way that we can stop it is to stand together. Those of us who are against what happened, we have to speak up. We can't treat this just like another.
We are watching right now a news conference just after the adjudication of the Daniel Penny case. And the woman who's speaking is Eric Garner's mother. It's been many years since we've seen her, Gwen Carr. Her son was killed in the New York City borough of Staten Island. And you talk about the case and her case against cops and the city and how his being black is just like the victim of Daniel Penny, who was threatening people, that victim, Jordan Neely, on a locked, you're locked underground inside of a subway car. The jury moments ago found the man on the right side of your screen, Daniel Penny, a former Marine, a hero in this country who has served, found him not guilty of a lower charge after being deadlocked on manslaughter of a lower charge of criminal negligent homicide. Leo Terrell, most importantly for this discussion, a civil rights attorney. He's also my friend and a Fox News contributor. Leo, your thoughts?
These individuals who are playing the race car is very offensive. I mean, you look at what was on the people on the passenger, the subway bus, people of color. And you saw Daniel Penny acting as a hero. Here, we have a black mayor in New York City. We have a black DA. And these individuals right now are telling America hates black people. That is a lie. That is an outright lie. This case was the rule of law prevailed today. A jury of his peers found him not guilty. And yes, these individuals, these people who you see at every incident are profiteers when it comes to the race car. It's offensive. They do not represent black America. They do not represent Americans. I challenge Eric Adams. If you had a new change of heart, protect Daniel Penny, protect the citizens of New York.
Yes.
Because these individuals do not represent black Americans or Americans in general.
So, Leo, what about the soft on crime DA, Alvin Bragg, who got this case in front of America at this point, who brought this case against Daniel Penny, even though Daniel Penny had not been arrested 10 days after the heroic act that he performed on that subway to save people? A woman and her child in a stroller were the two people that Jordan Neely was bearing down on with his threats, and Daniel Penny did what any Marine, any American that I know who loves this country and loves the co-citizens inside that subway car would do. He jumped in to help. So
right.
Go ahead.
No, the first question I learned in law school is why. You just laid out every reason why this case should have never been brought. But Harris, you and I understand the motivation of Alvin Bragg. Politics and racial identity. He plays the race card in this case because the victim was black, and then he plays politics with the law. And look at the Donald Trump case. So you laid out every single reason why this case should have never been brought. Because look at the end result. The jury accepted your version of the reasons why, but Alvin Bragg doesn't follow the law. Yeah. He plays politics with the law.
Leo Terrell, I requested that you join. You and I are sometimes together on these very important.
I don't know if the people that they're talking about is playing politics with the law, and I do have empathy for the parents and for the loved ones of the loss of this individual. But from all indication, from what I can understand, is that this individual come on to the subway that was basically vicious and at the point of frightening everybody because of his viciousness that he was portraying up onto that subway. I don't know how violent he become. I think that it is a responsibility with every citizen in every country whenever they see something like this occurring. They should try to intervene. That if you can't run, you can't get off the subway, just jump off the subway anytime you want to. Obviously, you can't. You're entrapped. But basically, you have a responsibility to try to cool the situation down. That's the whole primary purpose for them having bouncers in nightclubs, is because whenever people go to drinking, and God only knows what else that they're doing, they go into this atmosphere where it's a enticing, luscious, sexual motivated atmosphere of everybody twiddling and twisting in front of one another, acting the way that they're acting, enticing. And if it wasn't for the bouncers in a nightclub, there ain't no telling how many people would done already been killed. There ain't no telling how many people would have done already become mutually injured or whatever. So there does come a time whenever hostility requires hostility towards trying to stop the hostility that is being projected that shouldn't have never been projected. Now, on this particular case, I don't know. I haven't kept up with all of it because there's so much going on the news. Just like the individual that shot that insurance guy. That's another breaking story. But to me, this is just my opinion. After everybody realized what had went on, and that this individual to your right-hand side there basically was playing the heroic card in basically stopping this individual, everybody in there should have stopped him after give or take about 4 to 5 minutes of this chokehold that he had this individual in, and said, "Hey, we'll handle it from here. Break way. Let's take sheets. Let's take duct tape. Let's take whatever that we have to have, and let's wrap him up and make sure that we don't do no further harm to him. But then we're going to turn him over to the law and see what the law wants to do with him." Because listen to me, there are situations with individuals that's hyped up on PCP, on people that's hyped up on crystal meth, on heroin, on all kinds of other injecting drugs, that basically has the strength of about 4 or 5 men. One man can have the strength of 4 or 5 men. That's the reason why you see people looking like that they're Superman, being able to jump out of windows and it not hurting them. And we're talking about 2 or 3 stories and jumping over cars. And I mean, you have some very, very athletical people out there. Very athletical people out there that can really cause a lot of harm, especially if they're out of their minds. I don't know what the forensic expert said about this individual, whether or not he was on some sort of bad drugs. They're saying that he had some sort of a mental illness. Maybe that's true too. I don't know. But I'm just saying all of them that was associated with that event, that sat idly by for so much time while this guy had this guy on the ground chokeholding him, they all should feel the responsibility towards this man's death, because somebody should have intervened. This is my opinion now. You can say whatever you want to say about it. Somebody should have intervened and said, "Hey, buddy, you already got him down. Let's go ahead and roll him over. Let's take some duct tape, or let's take take your shirt off, and let's tie this individual up. Let's make sure that he's still living, but he's going to have to give an account for his actions because of his violence." Now, that's just my perspective of what I'm thinking should have happened. I don't know. I wasn't in there. I didn't see the film. I don't know all the details about this. There's no doubt. I feel sorry for the parents. I feel sorry for the loved ones, the cousins, the uncles, the friends and neighbors, whoever was associated with this individual's life, the people on the left-hand side that's doing the speaking right now. I feel sorry for them. I do. I feel sorry for them. But don't get me wrong. there's always two sides to the story. And obviously, the story that the jury heard, and this is the most important part of the story, really, is that they could not come into agreement that this individual on the right-hand side needed to be prosecuted for some sort of injustices. There is such a thing as street justices. You do have a right to protect yourself. Like I said, I don't know if that was the only way that this individual felt like that he could sustain this individual was to keep him in this headlock for, what they say, over 7 minutes. And basically the same thing that happened to George Floyd. I don't know. I know that it's going to upset a lot of people's opinions, and there's probably going to be protesters, and there's probably going to be people that's going to get angry about it. But I want to say something else about all that. When it comes to people's behavior, the public's behavior here in America after what went on that shouldn't have went on regarding the Reagans and the Bushes, especially after what went on with the Bushes that initiated 9/11 regarding Desert Storm and Desert Shield, that I tried to stop that from blowing out of proportion. I really did. Now, you can say whatever you want to say about my motives, just like I talked to a good friend that's been helping me all year long, and she's a sweetheart to me, and even though she may have some handicaps of her own, I was talking to her last night, and I said, well, you understand the reason why that I'm coming out into the eyes of the public with all this the way that I am, right? She said, yeah, to win over the public. I go, win over the public. She goes, yeah, that's the reason why you're doing it. I go, no, it's not. I go, my brother and I had full expectations. We didn't have the money at the time. We didn't have the sponsors at the time. We didn't have support at the time. Matter of fact, the whole community around here, I say the whole community, a great deal of the community around here spoke up against putting up a recovery shelter in honor of our veterans, and at the same time in putting up a memorial. The memorial had already began out here while David Jeffrey Jackson was still living. The building had already been partially built pertaining to the recovery shelter. So for anybody to say, well, he's doing this to win over the public, I kind of about halfway got offended in her saying what she said. And I said, you're friends with both parties. And I said, that's fine. That's up to you. I said, I'm not going to judge you off of what you do and what you don't do, because you've been fair to me. And what you and the other party do, even though the party that I'm talking about was the very party that created all the animosity out here, I said, that's your business. And I said, I don't have a problem in that, because that's your decision. But whenever she made a statement that you're doing this to win over the public, I'm thinking to myself, now where did that come from? That had to have come from somebody with a bunch of lies out here, with topped off with all the other lies, is that they can't just walk up and come to the conclusion that Dennis James Jackson, associated with the Jackson family, they can't just come out and say, well, he's a good individual that's got good motives, that has good intent. You know why they can't do that? Because so much has been said about Dennis Jackson. So much has been misrepresented about Dennis Jackson. So much has been arrogantly thrown out there about Dennis Jackson. You got people, probably 3 counties over, that knows anything about Dennis Jackson, that are wondering, well, what should I believe about Dennis Jackson? What is the truth about Dennis Jackson? Especially whenever you have people like the new era, I forgot the name of the newspaper agency in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, that had a big write-up about me, about a 6-column write-up, and said that I had a dark past. Well, first of all, everybody has a past. Once you reach the ages that we're in right now, I'm 63. I'll be 64 come March 2025. Once you reach that age, you're going to have luggage. You're going to have baggage. Now, whether or not your baggage is good baggage or bad baggage will probably be up to the interpreter that listens to it or knows anything about it based upon the receiving end. The whole facts of the matter regarding my particular story, I can't vouch for everybody else's, and you can either believe it if you want to or not, is that I have tried desperately to stop things from getting out of hand the way that they have. And of course, whenever you have the injustices that started at the top, at the White House, with the Bushes and the Reagans in 1989, it tried to label me as me being some sort of psycho-deranged maniac that was on his way to Washington, D.C. towards being an assassin, towards taking out George H. Bush's life. Whenever you have that start from the top, even though the 9 tapes had wound up going to the White House a year before, you can pretty well count on the rest of it sliding downhill to the point of you seeing what you're seeing right now because of that. In other words, we're seeing these disturbances in America right now because of what went on during that time frame in 1988 and 1989 that led into Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and then wasn't but a couple years later we had all the other incidences that happened with the attack of the Twin Towers. I forgot now how many millions of dollars that it cost to repair. I think it was something like $30 million. I may be off about that figure. Then you had the Ruby Ridge deal. Then you had the Waco, Mount Carmel deal. And then you had the Oklahoma deal. And then you had the 9/11 deal. If you're going to put these dots together, put them together in the right time frame. Something has occurred in America's justices that has went way too far with the Pentagon over to the left-hand side. And it's pretty obvious whenever you had people that was basically on a witch hunt towards trying to stop Dennis Jackson, even though it was Dennis Jackson that went out west and discovered the truth about the Mount Carmel Waco deal, and then found out the truth about the Oklahoma deal, that on both cases was not truly revealed openly before the public. And you're going to tell me that I'm the instigator in all this? Especially after the state of Kentucky done what they done, in addition to what the state of Tennessee had done, pertaining to the authorities, but especially what the state of Kentucky had done in 2007, after I was issuing out material towards electrical disturbances. They took it upon themselves towards thinking that I was going to create electrical disturbance by shutting down the Kentucky Dam up here, pretty close to Grand Rivers, Kentucky. Then they come after me 10 days later, wanting to know if I had any intentions towards wanting to blow up the dam. And I had to steadily tell them, no, I have no intentions. Well, what was you doing telling everybody about these electrical disturbances? Well, that's what God had showed me to explain to the public, give you these advisories, these warnings. And sure enough, since then, the state of Kentucky has sustained major repercussions whenever it comes to electrical disturbances, and that's not even the beginning phases of the electrical disturbances that has occurred in the past since 2007. But then the state of Kentucky come after me again, long about 2009, and after that probation period was over with, they come after me again in the year 2012 over 2 non-threatening telephone calls. So whenever you look at the injustices that's happening in America, you're looking at something that had to fumigate all this that began at the top. What occurred that should not have occurred in 1988 after 9 cassette tapes wound up going to the White House pertaining to the Dennis James Jackson story. Whenever they brushed that off to the side, that was the beginning phases of injustices. Just like in 1993, whenever I was watching on live TV, just like everybody else, pertaining to the incident that happened down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, as an individual kept holding up the Bible and talking about the opening of the seals, kept talking about the opening of the seals, kept talking about the opening of the seals. Well, that was part of the topics that I was preaching and teaching on at the time, pertaining to the opening of the seals, along with John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. And the rest of the Bible, including not just one particular part pertaining to end-time biblical Bible prophecies, but all of it. But people wanted to emphasize very strongly upon the topic that I was preaching on regarding the opening of the seals. They kept telling people again and again and again about these events. That took 51 days before the government finally went in there and killed them. Literally killed these people by pouring poisonous tear gas into the building for 6.5 hours, over 200 canisters that they admitted in a court of law up in the Capitol building. They had some sort of a hearing about it with Janet Reno and Bill Clinton. That, yeah, they was using lethal canisters in that building to flush them people out. While in the meantime, they was taking a tank and driving off holes that was creating a vacuum system for all the tear gas that was going in there. And eventually, once the tear gas got down to the very lower part of where the actual ground zero was, whenever the women was taking care of all the children, the electricity had been shut off from the building from day one. Those women had to have some way or another of watching and taking care of those children down there, so they had to have open flames, regardless whether it was coal oil lamps or candles or something. Once all that gas got down into that area, it turned it into a tire inferno. There was no way humanly possible, even if you had 100 people with 5-gallon cans of gas in each person's arm, and everybody timed it perfectly and started throwing gas all over the walls and all over the ceiling and all over the floor on both floors. It was a huge building. And then everybody got out of there at one time and lit the building on fire. If that would have been injected or accelerated by gasoline, it would have blown the walls completely out of the building. It would have blown the top partially off the top of the building. It would have been like an actual explosion with that much gas that had to have set that building on fire from the front end to the back end on both sides all at the same time. So it was not gasoline that done that. If you've ever seen gasoline go up in flames, it carries a concussion. Especially if you was going to have to take 100 people with 5-gallon of gas. You're talking about 500 gallons of gas to be ignited all at the same time. It would have blown the walls and the top out of part of that building whenever it got accelerated. So it was not gasoline that done that, and they know that. They have done soil samples or samples in the wreckage to be able to determine on what actually was the initiator that initiated that tire inferno. And it was the tear gas. It was the very tear gas that they had used. Well, prior to that, it was the Oklahoma authorities that was handling that situation because it was such of a high velocity, high profile case to get away from all the media. They set up a headquarters in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I can't prove this. This is a theory. But I feel like that probably along about the 35th, 37th, maybe the 40th day, somebody got on the telephone and told somebody, you know what, this has got to stop. One way or the other. It's making us all look bad. And the whole concept changed from being a rescue mission to a doomsday mission, and somebody brought in a couple boxes of dynamite and set it into the Oklahoma Memorial Building that was supposed to have been used directly on the Branch Davidians. They thought about it, and they thought about it, and they thought about it. Well, what else can we do rather than blowing up the building this way? That's whenever somebody come up with the idea, well, they're bound to be using some sort of means of light to be able to take care of them children. Let's just pour all this lethal tear gas into the building, over 200 canisters in a 6.5 hour period, that basically, once all that tear gas got down there, it initiated the flame. And once the flame started, it was like a crackling type explosion that basically started at one end of the building and went all the way to the other end of the building instantaneously, and the whole building was completely on fire in less than 60 seconds. From the front to the back to the bottom to the top, all the way around. Because it had that type of flammable tear gas in that building. They had filled that building full of nothing but lethal tear gas. So we basically heard one side of the story in trying to compromise the story, that the reason why that they done that was to try to spare the children's lives, even though the standoff had taken 51 days, that if they just waited a few more days, they'd had to have come out because they was completely out of materials to eat pertaining to food. Even though they could have arrested David Koresh at any given time rather than turn that into a big hoopla the way that they did. Even though it was the ATF agents that set up across the road as a bunch of college kids that got friendly with the ATF, with the Branch Davidians, that taught them how to go down to the south and buy up a bunch of semi-automatic rifles and turn them into automatic rifles, basically machine guns, and get paid about 3 or 4 times more for that type of gun than they would been if it was a semi-automatic rifle. So whenever they tell you that the reason why that they done what they done was because there was some perverted sexual immoral behavior going on the compound, they are lying to you. They are lying to you. They are lying to the public. The reason why that they went in is that they got a federal judge to sign off on a no-knock warrant pertaining to revenue profit. They got them on internal revenue charges pertaining to a certain particular tax was supposed to have been paid on selling a automatic rifle versus a semi-automatic rifle that the Branch Davidians wasn't paying for. They wasn't paying a certain particular tax. And that's what gave the authorities the right to go in there and bust them people. But even to add that much more insult to injury, is that the supervisor that was supervising that raid that day had already been told, hey, they're on to us, they know that we're coming, they're laying wait for us, should have waved off on that raid. If it would have been any other management, regardless whether it was Texas or Tennessee or Utah or wherever, they would have waved off on it because they know that the element of surprise was now spoilt. Because that's the whole initiative in doing a raid, is that you catch people unexpectedly. Well, once that has been blowed, your cover's been blowed, you're fixing to come in there and do that, you need to wave off on it because now you're fixing to get a bunch of people hurt. And that's exactly what happened on day one. A bunch of people got killed and hurt. And that's what initiated the 51-day standoff. So people can say whatever they want to say about my motives towards me going out west and doing what I done. They can say whatever that they want to say about me and my brother starting a recovery shelter out here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, that's associated and connected to 430 Beech Grove Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. They can make up any kind of innuendos that they want to make up, but the fact of the matter is certain things did not occur that should have occurred in America going back 30 plus years with the Reagans and the Bushes that has initiated this imbalancedness is that now the American people are having to wave off on. And how many times have we seen threatening situations exploding on TV? And yes, I did use the word explosion like everybody else does. Even though the people up here in Martin, Tennessee in 2005 wanted to try to deem me as me being some sort of a terrorist just because I used the word explosion in some of my criteria. Even though after I was questioned, I had no harmful intentions about using the word explosion. But they still pursued their actions towards wanting to put Dennis James Jackson in the spotlight of being a potential homegrown terrorist. Well, if you're trying to put somebody under the potential of being a homegrown terrorist, you're trying to monsterize, demonize, dehumanize that individual. Especially if your actions speaks louder than your words. I have never seen so much instability in America as what I have in my lifetime, in the latter part of my lifetime. Because we had instability issues that come up in the first part of my lifetime. I wasn't quite old enough to see and remember the JFK assassination, even though I've studied it very, very intensely. I do remember a little bit about Martin Luther King's assassination. I do remember my dad and a bunch of the locals around here talking about how that they was going to have to basically join arms because of all the rioting that was going on pertaining to the civil rights movement that started back then. I do remember some of that stuff, but I really didn't take it all in because I wasn't quite old enough to be able to really respond to some of those degrees. Yeah, we went through that era, and then there was 2 or 3 other things that occurred that was just, horrifying. But we settled it, and we went on about our business pertaining to public affairs. But for the past 30 plus years, we have seen things like this right here, toppled off with George Floyd, toppled off with all the gun violence, toppled off with all the illegals coming over here, toppled off with everything else. We have seen this country, the United States of America, change from being a decent, safe country to now being what it is today. To the point that even children are frightened to go out on the streets, that they're basically enclosed, they're basically entrapped towards having to stay in the compounds of their 4 walls, towards basically playing games and watching the internet. Because I can remember a time whenever the children around here, man, whenever there was an event, man, we all got together and there would be massive amounts of us. And we didn't have to have adult supervision to be able to do what we was doing. It didn't matter if it was festivities of Christmas or maybe it come a snow and we was all going down hills towards sliding, or we was ice skating on the ponds around here, because at that time the winters was really winters, and the ponds would freeze sometimes 6, 8, maybe even a foot thick, depending upon how cold the winter was. And we all got together and we all had fun. We didn't have to have people basically managing us or watching us, because the danger factors was not there. Just like whenever we would pull up in Westview High School or even Sharon School over here, and I'm sure if it happened over here, it probably happened all over the country, to where if you was a deer hunter or a squirrel hunter or a dove hunter or whatever kind of hunter, you put your shotgun or your rifle in the back of your glass on your truck. They call them gun hangers, that just about everybody and their brother had during that time. And you'd pull up at school, you'd do your school, and at the last bell, you get back in your vehicle, and then you go hunt wherever that you wanted to hunt or whatever that you wanted to hunt. Nobody asked you any questions. It was a safe environment during that time. People could trust people. Today, you pull up in a school, and you got guns being displayed in your back window in the back of a truck. You probably immediately going to have SWAT called in on you, or be arrested, or maybe even being taken down And because of the uncertainty of the danger factors that exist today that did not exist 40, 50, 60 years ago on the level that it is here in America. So something has obviously happened. That's my point that I'm trying to make. Something has happened that has caused everybody to freak out the way that they freaked out. Like I said, I wasn't in the jury pool. I don't know all the facts pertaining to this. I just know that society is totally out of hand in comparison to what it used to be, that it's no longer. There are a few countries that, if you study their history, has remained a very safe, loyal community. But then again, we have other countries right now that are blaring up and flaring up, that are rearing up like we've never seen before. Well, what is that? Well, that's part of the description that the Bible talks about in the last days, that there will be wars, rumors of wars, there will be conflicts, there will be uproars, there will be things going on that indicate the great sorrows falling upon humanity. As society is getting that further out of hand towards being that much more radicalized, we're seeing now the weather events following pursuit. The forces of nature has become just as radical as the people. And the more that the people become radical, the more that the forces of nature become radical. Once more, these are the dots, putting them together in the right time frame and being able to tell what I'm telling right now about what I'm seeing. Now, if people want to excuse this, if they want to continue to demonize me, if they want to continue to stereotype me, if they want to continue to ignore me, that's up to them. Just like my good friend that told me last night, well, yeah, you're trying to win the public. Why am I trying to win the public? The public is the ones that has caused this. The public are the ones that had turned against the Windmill Ministries, that wanted to put the founder of the Windmill Ministries under the spotlight of the Windmill Ministries being of a devilish source. Even Tommy Moore up here in Weakley County said, well, Juby, they think that you're of the black horse versus the white horse. They're that far upside down. They're that far deceived in not being able to identify what my true motives actually are. Just like this particular person that I come in contact with after I come back to Tennessee in 2014, that I've been associated with them now for a good while. It was basically part of one of her family members of being one of my helpers that come out here to help me routinely about for 4 or 5 years, different summers that I paid, small amount of money to have him, come out here and help, because at that time, whenever my brother David was dead, I didn't have nobody else to help. And at that time, I could have probably put up a sign out here, needed help for $100 an hour. And at that time, I still wouldn't have been able to have got no help. Why? Because the whole neighborhood had been brainwashed in believing that Dennis James Jackson was of a black horse, or that he was trying to mandate his belief off on everybody else, that it had been thrown up to me again and again and again. Well, if that's what you believe, that's what you believe. That you ain't got to throw it down our face. You ain't got to throw it down our throat pertaining to what you believe. Well, okay, I don't have to. But at the same time, you realize that if you don't listen to people like me that are actually trying to help you, don't be bellyaching about the consequences that goes along with it. And this is part of the consequences that I'm talking about, that you're seeing right now again and again and again on TV, American channel TV. That's in addition to what's going on in all these other different countries. I think as of 3 days ago, there was another flare-up in Syria, which, as far as I'm concerned, should have been towards putting down a regime that was unjust to their people. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take the people to insert justice upon the system that they serve under, regardless whether it be the Russians, the civilians of the Russians, regardless whether it be the civilians of China, regardless whether it be the civilians in the Middle East, in various countries over there, or the civilians over here. That's what it's going to take. But I'm looking at this right here, this particular case right here. Let's go back to this right here, what I'm looking at right here. I'm looking at this in the eyes of, I don't know. I really don't know. I know if it was me handling that situation, I had manhandled this person down because of his violent behavior, because it done freaked everybody out in that particular train corridor. I feel like that I would have had enough decency about myself that I wouldn't have just held this individual and held him 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 to the point that I would have basically taken the very life out of him. I think I would have recognized by holding him that once I didn't no longer feel any resistance coming from him, that it's time to let go of the chokehold, because now he's basically incapacitated. And at that point in time, you could take duct tape, you could take whatever, and tape the individual down to where you didn't have to worry about him becoming violent and hurting somebody. And like I said, I haven't studied this, and I probably don't have really a whole lot of business in intervening and talking about it. But what I would like to know is that after they determined that this individual was dead, 7, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, did anybody have the decency of jumping on top of him and doing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and trying to raise him back to life? Once more, now you're talking about a group thing. You're talking about everybody within that corridor was now watching and observing this. So now it goes beyond the perimeters of just that one individual that's on the right-hand side of being a Marine. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate his services towards what he done or whatever branch that he was in, military branch that he was in. I appreciate his services, but of all people that should have known how far to go with the line as far as holding somebody down like that, that should have been one of them. Because they teach them guys in military different strongholds, different death holds. They basically go through the same type of training that any type of police officer goes through in being able to handle themselves. I appreciate him intervening and possibly even saving the life of others. I don't know if it was that far out of hand. But of all people that should have known, hey, enough is enough. You've held him. You're no longer feeling any resistance coming from him. Let go and let's deal with the situation on another, differently, pertaining to restraining this individual. But he just hung on and hung on and hung on. I don't know why he hung on that long, but I'm just saying, if anybody should have known how long was too long, it should have been that individual that had military training. Now, that's the way I'm looking at it now. I don't know. It was all justifiable. But to sit there and squeeze the very life out of somebody, like they did George Floyd, is basically an open, public execution. You're just doing it in a different type way than what most people are familiar with. But as far as the execution, you can stone people to death. They do it all the time over there in the Middle East, or they did back in the Bible days. They stoned them to death with big rocks whenever they'd find them doing stuff that they wasn't supposed to be doing. Well, what was that? That was a public execution. Just like them crucifying the Lord Jesus Christ on a cross. They called it at that time a crucifixion, but in actuality, that was an execution. And that's how they dealt with lawbreakers back then. The thing about getting off all this now, going back to Syria, of the country that just now basically fell under the regime, I was told that it wasn't nothing but a death trap over there pertaining to so many executions that went on over there again and again and again. Now, once more, I don't know. I don't know all the particulars. I don't know what they was dealing with. I just know this, that our concept of going to the Middle East pertaining to Vice President Cheney, that was under the pretense of going to war in Desert Storm and Desert Shield, of bringing stability to that region and defeating the axis of evil. I just know that their attempts of what they done and how they done it, getting rid of Saddam Hussein, did not bring stability to that region, but if anything, it brought more instability to that region, because you're dealing with people over there that the only way to basically rule them is to dictate to them with a strong iron fist. Now, does that mean that I agree with some of the tactics that they use against their citizens in places like that? I don't know. I don't know how unruly that these people are. Just like I don't know how badly unruly that this one individual that got on that train actually was. I wasn't there. I can only tell you what their peers said, and if there's any reasonable doubt towards convicting the individual to the right-hand side of his intent, that he intended to do this, he intended to kill this individual, if there's any reasonable doubt, the jury is supposed to vote the way that they voted towards pleading not guilty. That's all I know. That's according to the system. So as far as I'm concerned, going back once more to this, it sounds to me like the system done what the system was supposed to have done. Now, there's always the fact of the matter towards people being swayed. There's always the fact that maybe all the evidence didn't get presented just exactly right, or it got misconstrued as it was being presented to the jury. There's always those possibilities. I don't know. Like I said, I ain't followed this per detail in giving you step by step everything that went on and how it went on, especially due to the fact that I was not there. I was not there. You was not there. There wasn't but a few people that was in that fuselage, that train fuselage that day, that was witnessing all this. So how they expressed themselves, how they didn't express themselves, only God can be the judge of that. And one day, if those people's motives was in the wrong area, God will know, and they'll be treated justly in the eyes of God towards the whole group that I personally feel like could have intervened, could have stopped an individual's life from being taken, especially if that individual was either on drugs or that individual was out of his mind pertaining to him being a mental case. Now let's go back to the Reagans for 1 second before I go back to recording this on this TV set. It was Ronald Reagan in the early 80s that made a conscious decision by telling, now this was after 1983, whenever the event happened in my life, pertaining to me being hustled by the authorities, going down to Bolivar and sticking probes and things in my head, wanting to know if I had any type of mental illness or detecting if I had any type of brain wave shortages, etc., towards the first time that I got humiliated the way that I did in 1983, after my life had been spared pertaining to a car accident, after my life had been spared pertaining to my own biological father attacking me while I still had 64 staples up and down my belly. But in the process of me going down there and going through all that, it was extremely humiliating. But because I went through all that, that's whenever Ronald Reagan, with his panel, with his cabinet board, got together and said, you know what? This is costing us X amount of dollars of housing these people in these mental institutions that are basically not a harm to themselves or a harm to society. Let's let them out. And by letting them out, we're going to save X amount of dollars by letting them out. Well, that's what they done. They released them. Saved, ain't no telling how many millions of dollars, maybe even $1 billion, I don't know, pertaining to the mental health industry. But now, look at the repercussions of what that action done 40 plus years ago. That was 40 years ago. Basically, whenever they made that decision towards putting people back out on the streets. And now, look at what we got. And look at how much of it that we got. So whenever I say what I say, that it couldn't have happened to a better group of people over here in the Western world pertaining to the United States, I'm talking about the adults, I'm talking about the baby boomers, I'm talking about those that had PhDs, I'm talking about the judges, I'm talking about the lawyers, I'm talking about the doctors, I'm talking about all of them that was part of the system back then that has allowed for this to escalate and get further and further and further and further out of hand. That it couldn't have happened to that group of people. Now, the rest of the people, I feel sorry for, because they didn't have nothing to do with those decisions. They didn't have nothing to do with the decision that was made in 1983 with Damian Cross, a mayor over here in Kenton, Tennessee, and 3 or 4 of the cops and 2 or 3 other townsmen, that Dennis Jackson needed to go to Bolivar and have a bunch of probes stuck into his head to see if he had some sort of a brainwave imbalances. It was only a few people that done that. But since then, it has elevated. It snowballed. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. And that's one of the reasons why that they done what they done to me up here in Martin, Tennessee, by throwing me in jail. Even though I was passing out Bible literature. Even though I explained to them that I didn't have no harmful intentions towards using the word explosion, it still costed me, give or take, about $500,000, me hiring Benjamin Dempsey to represent me, and I had to basically move out of this area because I know that they was going to be dogging me. And sure enough, even though I went to Davidson County in Nashville, Tennessee, they still wound up dogging me again shortly after Katrina hit. So yeah, I can put the dots together. Yeah, I got a good memory. I can remember all these things. Not just as what affected my life directly, but what has affected my life indirectly, going all the way back to whenever we did have a safe and secure, or a halfway safe and secure country, to the point of now, children remain in their houses because they're scared to go out into the public, not knowing what the public is going to do. You got to go back to its original core of origin. I completely say that again and again and again. I just got through watching a Star Trek thing again last night where they had to go get a whale and rescue it and etc. Whenever you talk about logic versus illogic, there was a certain amount of people going back 40 plus years ago that acted illogical. Whenever they was going to release all these mental health patients out into society, somebody didn't go about doing that properly. Especially whenever it comes to maintaining order and allowing for all these illegals to come over here to bring all these drugs and guns over here. The whole thing has went totally sour whenever it comes to what our ancestors originally intended for this country and how that this country was to be run. The whole thing has toppled. And we still got the same judges, we still have the same senators, we still have the same mayors, we still have the same politicians running the country today that was part of the broken system yesterday. And that's part of the part that I really don't understand, is that now we're understanding all these things, but the same people that was a part of the problem are still engaged in these positions. Talk about the blind leading the blind. You can't get much any worse than that, Bubba. Especially whenever you see proof in the pudding again and again and again. You see a pattern here, and I continue to keep telling people, we are on a holding pattern right now. This is a holding pattern of what we're seeing. These things escalate, getting worse. And worse and worse and worse. Because it wasn't just George Floyd. You got to go all the way back to all these other different occurrences that's happened with the police and different views of courts and stuff. You got to look at all of it. And the fact of the matter is, we are living right now in some of the most stressfulest, dangerous times in the world, especially in the lifespan of the American history of our history, which I think 2 more years from now will be 250 years. We're almost 250 years old pertaining to our Revolutionary War, whenever we won it in 1776. This is the year 2024. There you go. It's bad. It's bad, but yet no, I still can't motivate the people. Yet no, I still can't get supporters. Yet no, my mailbox is still empty. Yet no, my phone is still not blowing up. Yet no, I still don't have people supporting the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions. So the only thing I can do is, hunker down, dig in, just like I've said on my truck, hunker down, dig in, because a storm is coming. And it's only going to get worse before it gets better. And until we're willing to come to our wits, beginning in America, things is only going to continue to direly get even worse. And worse and worse and worse. And my question, my $64,000 question is, where does it end? Where does it end? Does it end pertaining to humanity basically destroying themselves? Because that's the trajectory that it's on right now. And you don't have to be somebody with a PhD to see that. Where does it end?
Very important moments, and if they don't get a handle on this, both the mayor of the city of New York,
Yes.
Eric Adams, and the district attorney would really help to come out on the courthouse steps and say, look, the law has been adjudicated by a jury. We are going to move forward. He can do whatever he wants legally, but he's got to help now quiet what's becoming a mob. Leo Terrell, thank you very much. More breaking news. Outnumbered starts now. Daniel Penny found not guilty of negligent homicide in the death of Jordan Neely. We were just hearing reaction from Jordan Neely's father and other supporters. The jury reached a decision after more than 20 hours of deliberations. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Kaylee McEnany.
So it basically took them less than a day to come up with their decision.
Neely's family members, Jordan Neely's father, Andrew Zachary, saying he misses his son and he believes there is a two-tiered system of justice. But I also want to talk about the moments in the courtroom when we heard this not guilty verdict. For the first time, we saw some emotion from Daniel Penny when he learned his fate. He smiled in that courtroom. His defense attorney started clapping, and this was obviously a very joyous moment for the defense. But for Neely supporters, there was anger. When the defense attorney started clapping, Jordan Neely's father said, quote, "Are you trying to get effing killed?" An activist in the courtroom also started making loud threats, one of them saying, quote, "It's a racist effing country." So tensions are particularly high here at the courthouse. Jurors this morning, they went back to deliberate for a little more than an hour before they went back to the deliberations room. I want to paraphrase what the judge told jurors.
I want to clarify what I was talking about a while ago pertaining to the public, about me not caring about the public. I care deeply about certain individuals of the public, especially the innocent, the elderly, and the children. I care substantially about those who are innocent, those that didn't have nothing to do with this conspiracy that turned into a travesty that began in my life in 1983 that I can prove. It's the people that brought this on to us. It's the people that was part of this movement, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes, that I could care less about. Because it was them that turned the left hand corner whenever we all should have been turning a right. And whenever I say that I don't care, it's not that I don't care about their souls, because I care about each and every person's soul, just like I think God cares about each and every person's soul. God cares about all of us. He don't care just about a certain group of us. But if you're not willing to come clean, if you're not willing to admit to your faults, if you're not willing to change, well, then you basically have created your own destiny. And it's not that God or God's people don't care. That's the destiny that you have chosen for yourself. And because of it, there's really nothing else to say about it or do about it. I can't be a bit more clearer than that. Whenever I say that it couldn't have happened to a better group of people over here in America, I'm talking directly to the adults. I'm talking directly to the baby boomers and those that was participating in these proceedings of the things that they either done that they shouldn't have done, or the things that they should have done that they didn't do. Either or, you're going to stand guilty of the problems that we're now facing. Because you don't have to be an Einstein to compare notes of the way that America was 40, 50 years ago in safety procedures versus where we are today.
Something to the effect of, no juror should surrender his or her honest view of the verdict just because you want to make an end to deliberations. I hope that helps. So we know jurors went back to deliberate at around 10:15 this morning, and they came back at 11:30 with a verdict of not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. This all comes, though, after jurors last Friday were deadlocked twice on the higher charge of second-degree manslaughter. After they came back the first time deadlocked, the judge read an Allen charge and sent them back to deliberate. Then they came back in the afternoon, deadlocked again. And at that point, the prosecution made a request for that higher charge to be thrown out. The defense objected to it and called for a mistrial. Defense attorney Thomas Kenneth said he thought it'd be coercive for jurors to continue deliberations. Nonetheless, defense attorneys told me they were trying to stay level-headed about today, hoping that this decision would come. And now we know, of course, jurors have found Daniel Penny not guilty of criminally negligent homicide. And I want to share this from our Fox legal researchers about that top charge, second-degree manslaughter, which again was thrown out. I've learned that if DA Bragg does try to bring another prosecution on the grounds of second-degree manslaughter, it may be considered double jeopardy, so he may not even be able to do it. But for now, a tense courthouse here as both sides remain divided.
CB, I appreciate all of that. Thank you. I do want to ask you the size of the crowd out there, and if it is looking decidedly different than
Did you hear what they just said? They just said that the proceedings of what the judge partaken in was basically illegal proceedings. That's the same thing that I've been talking about up in Land Between the Lakes in western Kentucky. Their proceedings and what they done by not sticking to the book. I stuck to the book. I was on probation for 2 years. I didn't contact them. I didn't associate myself with them. I drove purposely around them in LBL because of what had initiated pertaining to me calling up and leaving a recorded message about me feeling threatened about this darkly complected man and about me going to basically go after this individual that had come after me. Wasn't nothing ever mentioned about mysterious multiple telephone calls during court. I got proof of it. I got the CD of it, word for word. But yet no, 2 years after my probation, I made one telephone call to the actual law enforcement agency, waited approximately 90 days, made another telephone call to the individual that was working for the agency at the time. And because of it, they broke their own laws by coming at me with federal statutes. But then after they grabbed me up in Oklahoma and took me back to Kentucky, they lowered the cases down to a state charge and made it look like it was personalized. I had no idea about any of the individuals' lives that worked there at Land Between the Lakes during that time from A to Z. From A to Z. Had no earthly idea on a personal level of who they was, where they lived, where they didn't live, what they believed in, what they didn't believe in. It was them that was interfering with what I had been pursuing all my life, which was peace and utopia. In 1989, I went up there and I made a sacred site and stayed up there for 40 days and 40 nights doing my thing. And after the problems initiated in my life with Homeland Security and etc., the way that I was attacked illegitimately again and again and again by all these different people, God moved up into my heart to go back up there and do it again in 2007. Before 2000, Land Between the Lakes was being run by TVA. After 2000, it got changed over to a National Federal Forestry. I had no idea that that occurred. Had no idea that that even existed. Maybe that was my fault. You know, you can't claim ignorance of the law is no excuse. But the way them people attacked me from 2007 up until 2013, me being held illegitimately, I feel like one day, maybe not in this life, but in the lifetime to come, there's going to be a bunch of you know what type of people that's going to give an account for the destruction that they have brought into the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, as well as the destruction that they have brought up into the land. And I can't be no more specific than that whenever I say it couldn't have happened to a better group of people that has initiated this, beginning with the Reagans and the Bushes. It was Mr. Reagan that decided to let out all the mental institution people. Put them out to the people. Just like it was other agencies and presidential people that basically lowered the rule whenever it come to allowing for all these illegals to come over to America. Those people are still not giving account to the people because they're supposed to give an account to the people that put them in these positions. They're still not holding them accountable. Which once more goes back to the people. Kind of like once this individual held that individual down for 7+ minutes and took this very life from him, it wasn't just that individual that should be looked upon as being at fault, but the whole group of people that was in that pod, in that train. I don't know if it was 5, 6, 20, 100. I don't know. I didn't watch the story. I'm just telling you my feelings about it. That now you're looking at it from a group perspective versus a personal perspective, especially if he held him for that length of time.
Earlier, it was a pretty big number of protesters. What does it describe it to us now?
I would say there were about 24 protesters here in support of Jordan Neely. This morning we had about 5 protesters in support of Daniel Penny. We saw a small clash. Police quickly moved in, and the supporters here for Neely are still here. They've calmed down a bit, but we are expecting things to possibly pick back up.
Have you seen any movement of the city's mayor, Eric Adams, or DA Alvin Bragg coming out to sort of deal with potential animus in this situation? That's not the word I'm looking for. Inciting is what I'm looking for.
Exciting.
We have not seen New York City Mayor Eric Adams today, and we have not seen Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. We do know that Bragg sat in for one day of the trial. To my memory, that's the only time he was here one day of the trial. But protesters here are now blaming New York City Mayor Eric Adams for this verdict. So there's a lot more to watch for this case.
And why do they blame him specifically? Are they saying?
I think they're not saying specifically why they're upset at him. I think perhaps they're upset by some of his recent statements where he said that a jury of Daniel Penny's peers will decide Daniel Penny's fate. And that's what has happened here at the courthouse. These were everyday New Yorkers on that jury who take the subway every single day. Most of them said they take it, if not frequently, they take it sometimes.
CB Cotton, always great to be on screen with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
So, Larry, did America...
Let's go forward here. Let's go forward. Let's try to get this other case that they talked about a while ago that they made an arrest on.
I mean, that's probably...
This is it right here. Back up just a little bit. Busy news day today, isn't it? Let's go back here. I almost passed it all up. And then we're going to end here.
This. I mean, he just had a jury say, we didn't think he was even guilty of blameworthy conduct, and you're going to bring a higher charge against him? I mean, it would be absurd. But much of what Bragg does, most prosecutors would not do. So we're not making any assumptions here.
But getting back to the arrangement that the judge done, and basically telling the jury to go back and reassess the situation. That was almost a it was a biased decision upon the judge towards saying, well, if you don't find him guilty of this, we'll go back and we'll look at that.
But this is
and that's the reason why they said it was double jeopardy. And that's the reason why I say what I say pertaining to being double jeopardy of the state of Kentucky that went all the way to Oklahoma to pick me up, that it was a group of individuals that done already tried to nab me up on 3 different levels, twice in 207, again in 210. Done already got clearance from a mental institution that they wanted me to be evaluated in downtown Chicago by Dr. Dana, that I wound up getting A+ in all the arrangements. And then here they come after me again, illegitimately, over 2 non-threatening telephone calls after that I had done what I was told to do, which was do not contact these people for 2 consecutive solid years. It did not say forever in my orders. It did not say, Mr. Jackson, you are banned from Land Between the Lakes. It did not say, Mr. Jackson, you are banned from ever making contact with any of the people in LBL. It only said, stay away from them for 2 years. And I obliged the orders coming from the judge. But then afterwards, they used a double jeopardy tactic towards coming at me illegitimately, and then got a illegitimate doctor in LaGrange, Kentucky to put me on Risperdal. And I just got through recently going through a whole year of more physical pain of being operated on my left ankle over an old injury because of the unnecessary weight that the courts ordered for me to be on this drug that I was only on for about six or 8 weeks, but it was enough that it changed my whole chemistry from 240 to 340, and I got as high as 300 and almost 70 pounds. What they done to me was deliberate. They deliberately wanted that to happen to me. So I went through the pain, the agony of getting my left ankle fused, had to go through more pain and agony, had to go get another operation in washing out the wound that had been created because of the operation, and I'm just now getting to where that I can halfway be out of complete pain and walk and be like any other normal person. I'm just now starting to regenerate from all of that. That's what happened with a group of people that started the snowball in Kenton, Tennessee in my life in 1983. That event led to the event that happened in 1988, then the event that happened in 1989, then the event that happened in other events that I got proof of. I've got all this stuff on paper. And then I come back here to Northwest Tennessee, and basically I had about a dozen different families that was attacking my brother and I that basically caused the death of my brother. that the courts sat idly by and watched, that will be held accountable one day in the eyes of God. Judge Parham, Judge Tommy Moore, people over in Martin, Tennessee that was associated with law enforcement beginning all the way back to 2005. David Morse, all these other people that was associated with this, you're going to give an account for. You didn't get away with it. All these different church members that could read the Bible and interpret it just like I could, that should have studied the Bible correctly, that turn their backs on the Windmill Ministries missions, you're going to give an account for it. It's called justice. And it's called godly justice. Not ungodly justice, but godly justice.
This is a great verdict. It's the right verdict, and it comes from people of this community.
Jonathan, thank you.
Thank you.
Now turning to this major development in the manhunt for the gunman accused of the United Healthcare CEO killing. Right now, a man who matches the description of the gunman has been located and taken in for questioning in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And in New York City, NYPD divers are continuing their search of that iconic lake in Central Park. Alexis McAdams is live with the details. Alexis.
Hey, so we've been covering this since it happened, right? We were out there at that Hilton Hotel in Midtown about an hour after this whole thing went down where the CEO was shot and killed. We're now being told by police sources, you guys on the couch, that investigators believe they have a person of interest because they think it's the same man that was at the scene in Midtown. They say he matches the description. He was spotted by someone inside of a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So that's like a 5-hour drive away from where I am right now in Central Park. This is the last spot this gunman was seen. They've been calling him a person of interest. Now they're saying they're questioning a person of interest in Altoona, Pennsylvania, trying to figure everything out. Why do they think this could be the guy? Well, that's the main question. I'm being told by police sources, Kaylee, that it's because he had a weapon in his pocket at the McDonald's in Pennsylvania, and they believe it's the same weapon that was used in the murder of this CEO. What else did he have on him at the time that he was questioned at this McDonald's hundreds of miles away? Well, that would be a fake ID. It could be the same fake ID, I'm told by sources, that he used to check in at a nearby hostel here in the area in Central Park and on the Upper West Side. So this is all still developing. You have to think, though, how quickly these things go on, because it seems like it's slow. It's a drip of information, but really this thing is now flooded. We're getting a lot of new information. We're getting all those pictures that they put in and all this new information about a person of interest. So to find out that a person spotted him at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania just shows you that those wanted posters from the FBI and the NYPD could be working, because it was a tip from somebody at the McDonald's, you guys, that could help crack this entire case. We'll keep you posted on what else we find out.
Alexis, thank you. Emily, you were remarking during that reporter hit, and I think it's such a great point, how brazen it would be for someone to go to a McDonald's with a gun in their pocket. But that seems like the modus operandi of this killer. I mean, he's smiling at a camera days before he kills someone, going to Starbucks for coffee before killing someone.
Brazen and also surprising, given the duration that has passed since the killing. And you and I have been talking about this sort of in an ongoing conversation over the past few days, that I wonder if the behavior and the brazenness is so much that it almost appears juvenile, unprofessional, a little ridiculous. And so we've talked about that, perhaps that belies maybe a manufactured cover, that this person is it a patsy for someone else? Is this person truly this either this idiotic or this deliberate as to make us think these things? We will learn more, of course, as things develop, but I think it's fascinating that these sort of distinctive breadcrumbs this individual has been leaving this entire time have been, in the beginning, it seemed like, oh my gosh, what is all this? And then, well, the distinctive backpack, yes, very distinctive, and then interesting how we found it in Central Park, and then all of a sudden it just, it obviously speaks to the incredible police work and effort of the NYPD and the intelligence services with them, and then underneath that, I wonder if this guy is just
an amateur.
Yeah,
he's an amateur.
Totally.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like anymore. It's a professional hit job.
Yeah.
That was the original idea.
I don't know for sure. We'll learn a lot more. But it's if he's walking around with a gun and it turns out it's the guy, he's clearly an amateur and he has a beef against United Health. I mean, that's probably part of it. So maybe this was, as some people speculated, some crazy kid revolting. Maybe he didn't get the insurance that he wanted to get. But another point that Emily made, I just wanted to say this. I know I jumped the gun before. You know, cops are very good if you let them. The blue line, wherever it exists, are very good at what they do if you let them. If certain left-wing politicians would stay out of their hair, or certain people on the 7th floor of the FBI would let the FBI agents in the field do what they're supposed to do, okay? Take the politics out. Depoliticize, to use the word, depoliticize crime fighting and policing, because they can be pretty good. And by the way, while I'm at it, how about depoliticizing these juries? Because you know what? Ordinary Americans make our Constitution, and if you want to go back 1,000 years, the Magna Carta, look very good if you just let it work.
You know, Harris landed a plane. That was amazing.
It was. Harris, one thing that shocks me about this case, because we live in a world where everything's on social media at all times. We've seen this guy's face for days. And while Eric Adams says they think they know the name, police aren't letting it out, it's kind of surprising to me you don't see it on social media.
Yeah, some of the things I was picking up on social media, and I have a lot of questions about this legally, how it will play out in the case, was the support that this guy was getting.
Yeah.
Because he seemed to hate the healthcare system in this country, particularly United Healthcare. And I wondered, are there algorithms at a time like this that are capturing, I mean, for all we know, this guy responded to some of that. We don't know. So there's a lot that we don't know that the FBI and others have been collecting. But I think for the first time in history, we're about to see how social media really plays a role, because there was a lot of that as he was on the run. And it wasn't just for 24 hours. It was 6 days. There's that element. But also, yeah, that is kind of strange.
Yeah.
That the woman in the cafe where he first took his mask down days ago, and they were reportedly flirting with one another, like how that didn't generate a lot online. And people saying, yeah, I was there that day. And, because all this stuff has been during the daytime. People always have their phones on them, right? Yeah. So I am curious about how we didn't see more than just the surveillance cameras and what little lucky nuggets that we got along the way. No joke, because he was picked up at a McDonald's. I didn't mean that. But these are little nuggets.
Yeah, and one thing I think we'll find, and I started to pick it up over the weekend, this was methodical and planned out. I made the point that he had to have known this guy was staying across the street and know his movements to be waiting there, knowing he'd walk outside to the conference. Then I find out over the weekend from an eyewitness that I saw do an interview, he was there all night on that corner. He arrived just before Thanksgiving. He was in the area for a while. Also, we learned Monopoly money in the bag, the messages on the shell casings. He was trying to deliver some sort of message.
Yeah, and it seems that some of the investigation clues that they're looking at are intentionally left breadcrumbs, things that the suspect wanted investigators to find. The messages left behind, the Monopoly money, potentially some sort of message about greed in the industry, in the broadly speaking, and then that filtered into the online discussion. But the one thing that I find really surprising is just potentially, they say a witness in McDonald's may have been the one that spotted him and recognized him and turned this in. This face has been out across America now, and I don't understand why we're not here seeing the discussion online about this is my third cousin twice removed.
Yes, exactly.
Like people just saying, I covered the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing, and we had white hat, black hat. Their pictures, the suspects, the Tsarnaev brothers, before they were identified, clearly blatantly there, and people knew who they were. And right. I'm just wondering if, when this is all said and done, we'll get a little more information about potentially clues. Maybe people did call, give very good information. Maybe 6 people called with the same name and they had an idea. But I think it's interesting that just a witness, supposedly at a McDonald's randomly, may have been the one that cracked this and discovered this person, if indeed this is the person. Right?
Or the cops are holding the information.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about that.
If this person of interest is the killer, I mean, totally brazen to go to a McDonald's when there's a nationwide manhunt for you. And now a father, Brian Thompson, left from the earth. His 2 children, his wife, alone this Christmas. We're outnumbered in just a moment.
Well, we're going to leave it at that, what you've listened to today on this particular broadcast. on both cases. This is Monday. What is this? December the 9th? Or is it already the 10th? It's December the 9th, Monday, 2024. I hope that you've gotten some sort of intellect out of all this pertaining to some of my talk regarding the facts, not just hearsay, but the facts, in comparison to one case to another. And we want to pray for each and every person, regardless whether I like them or I don't like them, regardless whether they're elderly or young or American or non-American. We want to pray for each and every person because, like I said, the Holy Eternal Father puts equal emphasis upon every person's soul, regardless whether they was involved in my life or not in my life, regardless whether they be American or non-American, that there's always a possibility, as long as there's life within the body, that they can refrain and that they can make amends with the mistakes that's been made. In the meantime, I go on with my life. I go on in making my videos. I go on with telling my story. And hopefully one day somebody will grab a hold of it and realize that the things that I'm talking about are in fact true, are in fact on the money, and was in fact wrong. And no, I'm not trying to win over the people per se, but I would like to vindicate myself in being able to explain to certain people, especially the godly people, of what my intentions was to begin with. Now you can take that for what it's worth by saying that my friend was correct, by her saying what she said last night on the phone about me trying to win over the public. But the fact of the matter is, I feel like that people such as myself have been misconstrued. I feel like people such as myself have been misunderstood. And I feel like that the people such as myself do have a right in expressing themselves, in clarifying what, when, why, and how, and etc. Looking at the big picture pertaining to what started at the White House, that now rolled down from the White House to the church house, to the church house, to the school house, all the way down to you know what kind of house. It starts at the top and it goes from the bottom. And if we can't sensibly, logically start at the core of origin, where it all began, then you're never going to be able to solve the mystery. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. And heaven help us all. Shalom.